My colleague Jess did a great job explaining what qualifies a person for the death penalty, the history of the death penalty, and talking about an eye for an eye. I will furthermore address new reasons why we should repeal the death penalty in New Hampshire. I will start by bringing up how the death penalty violates the Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment, quote, "Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted," end quote. Cruel and unusual? I don't think one person in this room thinks it's the usual to put someone on death row, especially if you took everything Jess said into consideration. Quote, "After a special session, the Nobel Peace Prize winners have agreed that the death penalty is a particularly cruel and unusual punishment that should be abolished," end quote. This is what Nobel Peace laureates agreed on. People like Mikhail Gorbachev, Simon Peirce, and the Dalai Lama, and many more. It's not difficult to understand that the death penalty is cruel and unusual. So why do so many people believe that one might deserve this cruel punishment? Another reason why we should get rid of the death penalty in New Hampshire is the cost. An article in the Los Angeles Times, written by Carol J. Williams, states that in California, taxpayers have spent over $4 billion on capital punishment since 1978, almost $308 million for each of the 13 executions since that time. According to deathpenaltyinfo.org, New Hampshire spent $5.3 million on 2 capital cases last year and has not even had an execution since 1939. So where's all that money being spent? The Constitution requires a judicial process for cases like these. This is needed to ensure that the man or woman being charged are not innocent and are not executed for the crimes they did not commit. So there you go. Most of the money is spent right there. But is there a better way than this? A way to save more money and use it for more important things? Quote, "I think one of the most common misperceptions is the notion that the death penalty saves money because the executed defendant doesn't have to be cared for at all by the state's expense. Sums like these are causing officials to rethink the wisdom of such expenditures," end quote, said by Richard Dieter, Executive Director of the Death Penalty Information Center. The truth is that it would be less expensive to replace the death sentence to life without parole. According to Nodo.com, the average yearly expense for someone in prison is $43,352. Even if this person was to be in prison for 100 years, it would still be millions of dollars less than if they were put to death. Our country is trillions of dollars in debt. Shouldn't we be using this money properly? As of right now, there's one man on death row in New Hampshire since 2008, Michael Addison. He is held at the New Hampshire State Prison for Men in Concord. Some of you may have heard of his story, but he shot a police officer, Michael Briggs, and killed him. This was 6 years ago. One of the main problems with his death is that New Hampshire doesn't even have a death chamber. The estimated cost of this would be $1.7 million. That's $1.7 million more than we should even think about spending on it. An article on ABC News said that some death row inmates would maybe even prefer the death penalty. Quote, "There's some irony to death penalty opponents suggesting that life in prison would be a more humane sentence than capital punishment," end quote, said by Diane Clements, Executive Director of Justice for All, a Houston-based victims advocate group. She even admits that a sentence to life might even be worse than a sentence to death. That's another reason why we shouldn't have the death penalty. How is the death penalty supposed to teach anyone anything anyway? As just previously stated, why do we kill people who kill people to show the killing is wrong? Where's the lesson in that anyway? In some ways, that just makes us as bad as a convict. Overall, my colleagues and I truly believe that in enacting the proposal, be it resolved, the New Hampshire legislature repeal the death penalty is the best thing to do because the death penalty is morally and constitutionally wrong. But let me end leaving you thinking of this. What if the person who was sentenced to death was your family member? Or what if they were not guilty and couldn't prove differently? What if it was an accidental murder? Any of these could have happened, and somebody could have their life taken away from them when they shouldn't. Thank you.
negative side of this debate rejects the proposal be resolved the New Hampshire legislature repeal the death penalty. Gabby gave you the bigger picture of why there should be a death penalty. She talked about the danger to innocent citizens, the deterrence for other murderers, and the closure for families of the victims. I'm here to further address how these topics apply to New Hampshire and give specific reasons to why the death penalty should not be repealed. The death penalty is not a new concept. It's been around ever since people started to record history. People who break moral, societal, and government rules have always been punished. Humans have grown to realize hanging is not the way to carry out these sentences or electrocution. Thanks to modern technology, we now use lethal injection for capital punishment. We have made this as painless as possible just in case it needs to be used. But the fact is, New Hampshire has only executed 26 people in its whole history as a state. The last execution was more than 70 years ago. Wrongful execution is admittedly a serious problem for some states, but New Hampshire doesn't have this issue. New Hampshire judicial system is extremely cautious, and to prevent states have started to require more scrutiny of the possible death row cases. Even then, New Hampshire is so careful regarding the death penalty, a big mistake is not likely to happen. The last mistake that happened was 1768, which was quite a while ago, and we've been very cautious since. Since DNA technology exists, there's even a smaller window of error when examining the evidence. Also, evidence for serious crimes is not often needed because of how infrequent they occur in New Hampshire. In 2010, all 50 states were ranked from safest to most dangerous according to the amount of murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, and motor vehicle theft that occurs in each state. Out of 50 states, New Hampshire is the safest. This is for a number of reasons, but is mainly because of how strict our laws are. People in New Hampshire are aware of these consequences of their actions. Punishment has long since been used as a warning to other people thinking about committing the same crime. Over time, our concept of punishment has changed, but the basic principle is still there. The capital punishment of someone convicted of homicide would be greatly discouraging for potential murderers. These potential murderers will think twice about committing a crime in fear of losing their own lives. What is something almost everyone fears, even murderers? Ironically, it's death. Ernest van den Haag, as Gabby quoted before, in his book, The Ultimate Punishment, a Defense, was quoted saying, "Execution of those who have committed heinous murders may deter only one murder per year. If it does, it seems quite warranted. It is also the only fitting retribution for murder I can think of," is what Van Hagen said. Most of our society shares the same view as Ernest van den Haag. The death penalty for taking a life is a justifiable punishment. If you talk to friends, family, and loved ones of victims of horrible tragedies, they cannot see how their loved one's life is worth less than a murderer's. Robert Macy, a district attorney of Oklahoma City, describes one of his cases in which a young mother was rendered helpless and made to watch her baby being executed. The mother was then brutally murdered and killed. The killer should not lie in some prison with 3 meals a day, clean sheets, and cable TV with family visits and endless appeals. For justice to prevail, some killers just need to die. Robert Macy. The argument has been made that life without parole is worse than just dying quickly and painlessly, but this is clearly not the case. In the case of a horrible tragedy like the one depicted by Robert Macy, If there's no death row, the murderer would be able to comfortably live out his or her life. Why does this person deserve to live so respectably while he or she committed one of the worst offenses in our society, taking someone else's life away from them? Even if this person kills only one person, it affects more than just the victim. It affects the victim's loved ones, families, like their siblings and their friends and children and partners. All of them have to wake up each morning and remember what the person took away from them. Imagine if your whole family was brutally murdered and New Hampshire didn't have the death penalty. You would wake up each morning and know the person responsible is getting 3 meals a day, living comfortably with clean sheets, cable TV, and the family visits. Well, if you wanted to visit your family, you'd probably have to go to a graveyard. Some states say that the death penalty is too expensive. That should not be a reason to prevent the justified punishment of that murderers deserve. The cost of and how it's more expensive to put someone to death and keep them in jail with parole often comes up. However, for example, if a 25-year-old man committed homicide and was sentenced to life without parole, if the average human life spent in America is about 76 years old for men, that would mean that the jail would have to support him for 50 or more years. If it also has been proven that younger people commit more crimes. If we didn't have the death penalty, there would be much more people that would have to live out life in jail, which would add up. Some states, like Georgia and Oregon, have tried to solve this problem by providing parole as an option. Professor Paul Castle, a former judge from Utah, points out of a sample of 164 paroled Georgia murderers, 8 committed subsequent murders with 7 years of release. A study in Oregon released on parole in 1979 found that 5% had committed a subsequent homicide with 5 years of release. Another study found that of 11,404 persons originally convicted of willful homicide and released during 1965 and 1975, 34 returned to prison in the commission of subsequent criminal homicide during the first year alone. New Hampshire's governor of 4 terms believes very strongly in the presence of the death penalty. John Lynch said, "I believe strongly that there are some crimes so heinous that death penalty is warranted. As a state, we've used our death penalty statute judiciously and cautiously as is appropriate. As Governor Lynch said, New Hampshire is not like Texas. We have not put anyone to death for 70 years because we've been so cautious. However, with the death penalty, if something horrible does occur, we know the person will face justice, no matter what the cost. Because here in New Hampshire, I'm proud to say that the rare loss of significant sums of money does not take precedence over an act to ensure the safety of its citizens."